Right, exactly. And actually, the person that inspired Jack, I don't know if you know who inspired Jack LaLanne, but it's a
Paul
gentleman,
Bragg.
Paul Bragg. You
There you
got it.
go.
It's one of the greatest of all times, and and he wasn't necessarily the fittest in terms of, oh, I can do a muscle up or a front lever or whatever. But I remember one of his books, and I don't know if it's true or not, but he challenged some of the fittest people in the world through a race across the Rocky Mountains.
Oh,
And this is when he was 70, 75 years old, and he destroyed everyone. And these guys are in their 20s and 30s, and they're running Ironmans and everything else. And who won? Paul Bragg, the 70-year-old. And how did Paul Bragg die? He was in his mid 90s, flipped off his surfboard and hit his head on a reef. Like, hey, that's how I wanted.
it's amazing how some of these old school health experts can live for so long. I can't remember. It was Joe Rolino recently passed away at 106 years old and got hit by a car on his daily 5 mile walk. And I cannot believe that. That is crazy, man. And he was a lot like, the same with the Jack LaLanne and the Paul Bragg stuff. Did you know Jack LaLanne could do 107 freestanding handstand push-ups in a row?
I know, I did not know that.
For
I'm
a
not
lo-
surprised, but I did not know that.
He had the world record for a long time. I never forget seeing that video. I can't find it anywhere right now, but I just remember seeing him just go down, up, down, up, down. Absolutely incredible the amount of strength and control that guy had. It was just wonderful.
Well, I mean, a lot of those old school guys, I used to do a lot of isometrics, and I still do a lot of isometrics, and looking into some of the old school masters, the Charles Atlas and some of the other guys as well. They're bending bars. One of the guys was put in prison. I think it was in Russia, and he was a strong man, and he was put in prison in one of the wars. And over time, he escaped 3 times. And the way he escaped is he bent the bars. He's sitting here, doing these isometrics, and eventually he just bent the bar and it just walked right out. And they caught him the first 2 times, and on the third time he escaped. And it's like, dang, now we barely have functional strength to pull off the jar of a pickle jar. It's like, oh, great, we're great at CrossFit, and CrossFit is great. I love, it's a great exercise system, but there's this element of functional strength that a lot of these people don't have. I remember, my old Kempo karate instructor, and they would run for his class. They would run drills where you did 45 minutes of solid calisthenics. And people would be going to the corner and puking because it was so challenging. And then only after that is when you practiced your technique and your sparring and your rolling and whatnot. And it's because you couldn't rely upon strength. You had to push yourself to the max, and then you could focus on that form. But I think we've lost a lot when we say, let's just do, I mean, there's a value to short workouts, but there's this element that like these old school strong men had that I think we've missed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. I actually had the privilege of working with Dennis Rogers years ago. Do you know who Dennis Rogers is? He's like one of the still alive strongmen of this day, and he can do things like bend wrenches and roll up frying pans and tear tiny little decks of cards with just his little fingers and stuff. And the strength that guy had, that functional strength you're talking about, was just absolutely amazing. And the guys he hung out with too, like I was sitting there with Greg Matinick, who's recently actually passed away, but he would take a quarter, he'd put it in his teeth, and he would just bend the quarter like that, and he'd give it to the kids. And it was just incredible. These guys had the most amazing real world strength that you just didn't understand any other way, and they got it through decades and decades and decades and decades of just practicing these movements, practicing against immovable objects, practicing against all this other stuff. That kind of brings me to an interesting point that you mentioned just now too. We all talk about 20-minute workouts because that seems to be the theme in the fitness industry. Everybody's busy, nobody has enough time, so on and so forth. But you're talking about self-mastery at the same time. Do you think that you can achieve self-mastery with these 20-minute workouts, or do you think that sometimes we need to realize that if you really want to get to the next level, maybe you do have to practice for an hour or 2 hours and so on and so forth?
If you look at you take fitness aside and you look at any sport or any endeavor, the greatest in that endeavor practice constantly. It's morning, it's night, it's if they have a day job, it's during their lunch hour, and then they come home and kiss their baby and wife and go down into the basement and start practicing. And I think um, in our minds, we like to think that we're a master, and I only work out 3 times a week in 20-minute sessions. If your goal is fat loss and getting a nice lean fit body, that's fine. Like, you can do that. I mean, you're eating really clean, healthy foods, and you're strengthening your body. Like, that's like a no-brainer. That's easy. But if you want to become like a master, and you want to eventually get your one-handed handstand, or rise to that 5 or 2% in whatever field you're in, honestly, it goes beyond looking at how many hours I'm putting in, and it goes into this element of, this is what my life is about. This is what I'm dedicating my life to about, and I'm willing to sacrifice these other things. I'm not going to watch TV. I'm not going to fix my car. I'll have someone else fix it's like these elements that you need to pull things off of your plate so that you can focus and master this. If calisthenics is your goal, becoming a master of it, yeah, honestly, I think it needs to take 3, 4, 5 hours a day of high quality training. You look at gymnasts. I mean, and they're focusing on their flexibility and their general fitness, and then they're working on their skills and their ring work and floor work and whatnot, and then focusing on their strength. And they do that, most days out of that week. And so I think there needs to be a level of self-sacrifice to become great at something and master something that requires looking beyond, how many hours did I put in? It's more like, how many hours can I take off in other things so I can focus on my specific endeavor.
Yeah, it's about creating priorities. That's really interesting. You mentioned that. I told you when we met up that I had the privilege of working with Jean-Luc Martin, who was a former Cirque du Soleil hand bouncer. And when he was talking to me about the routines they would do, that you're exactly right. I mean, they would literally be on their hands for hours and hours and hours every single day. And then when they weren't on their hands, they were doing acrobatics and flexibility and strength training and other drills with all these people. And it was humbling for me, who, like you said, we can call ourselves masters or experts and so on and so forth. But this guy had been studying the handstand for 2 or almost 3 decades. And so he looks at my movements and he's like, oh, look, your index finger isn't doing this proper thing like that and everything. It was like the most subtle details that went into the style of training he had versus what most people do. Maybe they say, oh, flatten your back out in your squat or push your knees over your toes and then keep your weight on your heels. Like those are like the superficial form cues, but the mastery goals to be able to get to that really awesome level. It's a whole nother level.
Right. And I think that there's, the trend online right now is hacks and hacking.
Biohacks.
Biohacking or, technology or whatever hacking. And, hacking essentially is trying to become a master faster. How do I do it faster? How do I speed read? How do I do this? How do I do that? And, there's a cool element. Oh, I learned this. I learned how to, speed read, and now I can read a book in an hour or something. But honestly, I think it takes away something that's even more valuable. Like you said, working on something for a decade, there's this sense of pride. Like, there's a sense of accomplishment that I actually focused on something for 20 years. What have we focused on for 20? I've never focused on anything for 20 years.
I'm thinking about it too. Oh no.
Right, exactly. And I think the younger generation, and I'm the millennials, I'm 31 right now, and it's like, it's like this desire to, I think as a generation we have ADD. It's like moving from one thing to the next, and I think we're gonna swing this pendulum, and we're gonna get off Facebook, and we're gonna separate ourselves from our iPhones and not check it every 3 minutes, and so that we can master one thing and become really good at this single element. Because I think this hacking trend is, I think, it's not bringing as much value to people as we may think, because I think it's taking away this core element of being committed to one thing for maybe even a lifetime.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I actually wrote an email about that this week, Todd, where I sent out some emails to the bodyweight bundle thing that you're running. We'll talk about that at the end of at the show, but I sent an email to it, and some guy said, "Oh, I can't do these exercises," and then he gave me this list of criteria that had to fit into what they wanted back from me. And it was all these excuses. It just heard excuse after excuse after excuse. And it just was really challenging because I was like, what this person's afraid of is doing the work, is hard work. And one of the reason why I'm successful in my business, with my training, is because I like hard work. I've trained myself to go, oh, this person wants me to do that. Well, guess what? I'm going to smile the whole time I'm doing it. I think a lot of people they go into the gym or into their workouts or into their goals or whatever, and they're just, oh, I don't want to do that. It would be so much easier to order a pizza and watch a movie.